Have you ever noticed how some people try to control conversations with insults, pressure, or aggression, expecting you to break, react, or defend yourself? Most people do, and that reaction is exactly what gives them power. But there is another way. In this video, you will learn 10 smart responses that instantly shut down negativity, stop manipulation, and make aggressive people lose control of the conversation without raising your voice once. Simple words, calm delivery, powerful results. Number 1. You're entitled to your opinion. One of the smartest responses you can ever use is simply saying, "You're entitled to your opinion." This response is powerful because it refuses to enter emotional combat. Many difficult people desperately want reactions. They want you to defend yourself endlessly, lose your composure, or become emotionally unstable so they can feel powerful. But when you calmly acknowledge their opinion without surrendering your peace, the entire dynamic changes. Suddenly, they realize they cannot emotionally control you. Epictetus once explained that if someone speaks badly about you, remember that they only describe what they believe, not necessarily the truth about who you are. Stoicism teaches that other people's opinions belong to them, but your peace belongs to you. That is why this response works so effectively. You are not agreeing with the criticism, but you are also refusing to become emotionally trapped by it. Many people become silent after hearing this because they expected resistance, not calm confidence. Strong individuals understand that not every insult deserves a debate. Sometimes emotional detachment is the greatest form of strength. It is the fact that this statement immediately removes any emotional tension that may have been there in the conversation that makes it so potent. People typically anticipate that you will respond defensively when you are chastised. They are anticipating a lengthy explanation, rage, or annoyance from you. You, on the other hand, are denying them the response they were looking for when you say, "You are entitled to your opinion," in a cool and collected manner. Because others lose influence over you the instant they realize they are unable to manage your emotions, that peacefulness has the potential to completely alter the proportion of power that is in your possession. According to Epictetus, if someone is able to manipulate your feelings, then they have complete authority over you. Because of this, the Stoic philosophy placed a significant emphasis on the discipline of one's emotions. As soon as you stop letting every opinion to disrupt your tranquility, you will gradually develop a more robust mental capacity. There are some criticisms that do not warrant your attention, and there are some insults that do not warrant a fight. Because they are continuously trying to defend themselves against every unfavorable word they hear, many people spend years of their lives to the point where they are emotionally drained. A quiet confidence is also demonstrated by this response. They do not feel the need to convince everyone to like them, approve of them, or understand them. Secure persons do not feel the need to do so. They have an inner assurance that allows them to be emotionally secure since they are aware of who they are. Marcus Aurelius was constantly reminding himself that the opinions of other people are not within our control, but that our reactions are always within our control. By adopting this mentality, you are able to achieve emotional liberation since you will no longer rely on external affirmation to achieve inner calm. Another reason why this answer is so beneficial is that it prevents unneeded conflict from rising to a more significant level. Because both parties are experiencing emotional upheaval at the same time, the majority of conflicts endure. A single insult might lead to additional insults. Confidence is brought up in the discussion. Feelings of anger take over. On the other hand, responses that are calm fully break that pattern. When someone anticipates experiencing opposition but instead obtains composure, they frequently lose momentum. This is due to the fact that conflict requires emotional participation from both parties in order to be successful. Mastering reactions such as this will, over time, influence the way that people interact with you. People who are emotionally manipulative typically target those who are quick to react. When individuals become aware that you maintain your composure in the face of adversity, they start to comprehend that provoking you will not be successful. Moreover, this emotional self-control turns into a type of quiet power that only a select few individuals are able to truly shake. Number 2. What makes you say that? This response is extremely powerful because it forces people to explain themselves. Many rude comments are impulsive and emotionally driven. People often say hurtful things without thinking deeply about their meaning. But the moment you calmly ask, "What makes you say that?" everything changes. Suddenly, the other person is forced to slow down and justify their words. In many cases, they immediately become uncomfortable because their comment was never intelligent to begin with. It was emotional, careless, or simply intended to provoke you. Socrates greatly influenced Stoic philosophy through his method of questioning rather than emotional arguing. Instead of attacking people directly, he asked calm questions that exposed flaws in their thinking. Stoics later adopted this same discipline because questions reveal far more than emotional reactions ever could. When you ask someone to explain themselves calmly, they often expose their insecurity, contradiction, or lack of logic without you needing to attack them at all. Intelligent people understand that calm curiosity is often more powerful than emotional aggression. A single thoughtful question can silence someone faster than shooting ever will. The subtle emotional strain this response generates is what makes it even more potent. Rude or passive-aggressive persons typically anticipate emotional responses rather than calm inquiries. They anticipate that you will feel defensive, irate, or uneasy. However, you put them in a very different situation when you gently ask, "What makes you say that?" They now have to give a clear explanation, and many individuals know right once that what they just said cannot be rationally defended. Epictetus said that before behaving emotionally, smart individuals should try to grasp the situation. Stoicism argues that while quiet observation reveals truth, emotional emotions frequently impair judgment. That's precisely why this response is so effective. You change the topic of discussion to one of logic and clarity rather than emotional conflict. Additionally, a lot of emotionally motivated individuals feel uneasy when reasoning is brought up. Because manipulation frequently relies on confusion and emotional pressure, this approach is particularly effective against manipulative people. Sarcasm, veiled insults, and passive-aggressive remarks are all intended to cause you emotional distress without offering you a concrete point of contention. However, polite inquiries reveal ulterior motives. Everyone in the room can frequently see the fragility underlying someone's nasty comment when they are compelled to explain it honestly. Seneca cautioned against rash emotional responses since anger frequently causes people to lose their composure. Inquiring calmly has the opposite effect. It puts pressure on the other person while maintaining your emotional composure. You are naturally in a stronger position in the conversation because of your emotional control. This remark conveys confidence without being aggressive, which is another reason it works so well. You're not yelling, you're not responding to their insults. All you're asking for is clarification. Additionally, mentally, serenity frequently seems to be significantly more potent than strong emotions. Calm intelligence is far more difficult to overcome than aggressive people, who typically anticipate opposition. Responses such as these eventually teach you to quit emotionally responding to every unfavorable remark you hear. Rather than defending yourself right away, you start paying closer attention to individuals. You begin to see that a lot of offensive remarks show the speaker's emotional immaturity, frustration, jealousy, or insecurity, and their remarks lose a lot of their emotional impact on you once you realize that. Number 3. I don't see it that way. One of the strongest things a person can do is disagree without becoming emotional. Most people think disagreement automatically requires conflict, but emotionally intelligent individuals know how to stand firm calmly. When someone attacks your perspective saying, "I don't see it that way," communicates independence and inner confidence. It shows that you are not easily pressured into changing your beliefs just because someone speaks loudly or aggressively. Marcus Aurelius constantly reminded himself not to become controlled by public opinion. As emperor, he faced endless criticism, betrayal, and political pressure, yet he believed that inner judgment mattered far more than external noise. This response works because it avoids emotional escalation while still protecting your boundaries. You are not insulting the other person. You are simply refusing to surrender your perspective. Aggressive people often expect emotional resistance because that is how they maintain control. But calm disagreement without anger is extremely difficult to overpower. Real mental strength is not loud, emotional, or desperate. It is steady, controlled, and deeply confident. The thing that makes this response so strong is that it demonstrates that you are capable of thinking independently without the need for emotional acceptance from everyone else in your immediate environment. Many individuals are terrified of conflict or rejection, and as soon as they sense pressure, criticism, or social friction, they modify their beliefs. This is because they are afraid of being rejected. For example, if you remark, "I don't see it that way," in a cool and collected manner, you are conveying that your perspective is not dictated by intimidation. Due to the fact that you are able to argue without getting hostile, you immediately command respect because of the level of emotional stability you possess. According to Epictetus, sensible people should never mindlessly follow the majority whenever they are in a group. Stoicism is a philosophical philosophy that urges individuals to think rationally rather than emotionally reacting to the opinions of others. Because of this, the ability to disagree without becoming angry is a very powerful skill. It demonstrates that your mind is yours, and not the mind of the person who is the most outspoken in the room. It is also possible to avoid conversations from becoming emotionally harmful by using this reaction. People stop making an effort to understand each other and instead begin making an effort to dominate each other, which is the root cause of the majority of fights that become toxic. The pride takes control. Emotions become more intense. As the conversation progresses, the focus shifts from the truth to the pursuit of victory. On the other hand, a peaceful argument completely alters the energy. The other person is not being insulted, nor is their character being attacked for that matter. Rather than engaging in emotional hostility, you are merely maintaining a firm stance in your own perspective. It was Seneca's belief that one of the most important indicators of wisdom was the ability to manage one's emotions. He cautioned that individuals who lose control of their emotions frequently also lose control of their judgment that they have acquired. This is the reason why maintaining composure in the face of disagreement is so vital. A person who is more calm tends to give the impression of being more powerful, since emotional control naturally promotes authority. It is also successful because it upsets people who are manipulative, which is another reason why this approach is so powerful. A significant number of aggressive people rely on the use of emotional pressure to coerce others into agreeing with them. The speaker raises their volume, interrupts frequently, or makes an effort to make the person who disagrees feel uncomfortable. Nevertheless, these strategies lose a significant amount of their potency when you maintain your composure and self-assurance without becoming defensive. Emotional opposition is something they anticipate, but quiet confidence is considerably more difficult to overcome. Your entire frame of mind can be altered over time by learning to argue in a calm manner, because you no longer consider disagreement to be a threat. You no longer experience feelings of being threatened by differing viewpoints. It dawns on you that self-assured individuals do not require everyone to believe exactly the same way as they do. In addition, once you have reached that level of emotional maturity, it is far more difficult to frighten, manipulate, or emotionally control you. Number 4. Interesting. Sometimes the smartest response is also the shortest. When someone insults you, criticizes you unfairly, or attempts to provoke you emotionally, calmly responding with interesting can completely destroy their momentum. Why? Because it denies them emotional satisfaction. Most toxic people feed on visible reactions. They want frustration, anger, or insecurity because it makes them feel influential. But a calm and detached response creates uncertainty. Suddenly, they do not know what you are thinking, and that uncertainty weakens their confidence immediately. Seneca once wrote that one of the greatest remedies for anger is delay. A short response creates emotional distance and prevents you from reacting impulsively. It allows you to remain mentally above the chaos instead of becoming consumed by it. Short responses also communicate self-control because they show that you do not feel threatened enough to defend yourself desperately. Powerful communicators understand that silence and simplicity often carry more weight than long emotional explanations. Sometimes the less you say, the more powerful you appear. The psychological disruption this response causes in the other person's expectations is what gives it even more potency. When someone makes an offensive or provocative statement, they typically hope to elicit one of the following responses: rage, defense, rationalization, or emotional breakdown. However, you totally break that pattern when you calmly reply with a straightforward interesting. They are uncomfortable because their tactic abruptly ceases functioning since they have no emotional hook to cling to. Marcus Aurelius frequently considered the significance of avoiding emotional turmoil brought on by other people's deeds. According to his teachings, the true risk is not what other people say, but rather how hastily and mindlessly we respond to it. Interesting is an example of an answer that causes a pause in the conversation, which is when control is restored. You are observing quietly rather than responding emotionally, which instantly puts you in a stronger mental position. The fact that it compels the other person to examine themselves makes this answer very potent. Many people become unsure after hearing the word interesting. They begin to question whether their insult was worthwhile or if it had any impact at all. Aggressive behavior is weakened by this ambiguity. The majority of harmful communication relies on outward effects. The activity becomes meaningless without that effect. According to Epictetus, our perceptions of outside events are what cause us distress. Your judgment is impartial, detached, and under control in this situation. You're not emotionally resisting or consenting, you're just watching. Others find it very difficult to control or intensify the situation because of this emotional neutrality. This response's emotional independence is another factor contributing to its effectiveness. Individuals that are easily provoked often protect themselves, defend themselves, or take immediate revenge. However, emotionally resilient people don't feel compelled to react in depth to every provocation. A composed, modest reaction demonstrates that your emotional condition is independent of other people's actions. Many people view that independence as a sign of strength. Responses such as this alter how you are treated in conversations over time. They start to understand that trying to agitate you won't make them feel anything. and many people just give up when they come to that conclusion, because the instant provocation fails to exert emotional influence over you, its power vanishes. Number 5. I'm not going to argue about this. This response instantly changes the emotional direction of a conversation because it establishes boundaries while protecting your peace. Many people become trapped in endless arguments because they feel obligated to prove themselves constantly. But intelligent individuals understand that not every conflict deserves their energy. Saying, "I'm not going to argue about this," communicates emotional maturity, not weakness. You are not surrendering, you are choosing peace over pointless chaos. Epictetus taught that if a conversation pulls you away from reason and self-control, then it is already costing too much. Stoicism is not about winning every argument, it is about mastering yourself. This response also reveals confidence because secure people do not desperately need everyone to agree with them. They understand that some individuals are committed to misunderstanding others, no matter how much explanation they receive. One of the greatest forms of power is knowing when to disengage. Calmly walking away from unnecessary conflict often frustrates toxic people more than any insult possibly could. A further factor that contributes to the effectiveness of this response is the fact that it quickly eliminates fuel from the debate. The majority of confrontations are able to persist because both parties continue to feed them with reactions, explanations, and attempts to escalate their emotions. However, the instant you make the statement, "I'm not going to argue about this," you gently put an end to the emotional engine that is keeping the conflict alive. Nobody is being insulted, nobody is being aggressive, and nobody is trying to win. For all intents and purposes, there is simply a distinct boundary, and that clarity is frequently sufficient to completely alter the course of the discourse. Frequently, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that squandering one's energy on useless strife is detrimental to one's mental health. Throughout his writings, he highlighted that not every argument is worthy of attention, particularly when it results in emotional discomfort rather than understanding. The power of this response can be attributed to this manner of thinking. The reason you are reacting is not out of ego. As a result of your discipline, you are acting. Of addition, this sentence causes a shift of power that is psychological in nature. A lot of individuals go into disputes with the expectation that they would win via tenacity. They have the presumption that if they speak more loudly, for longer periods of time, or with more aggression, they will finally take control of the debate. On the other hand, their tactic is rendered ineffective when you refuse to continue participating. Nothing remains to be fought against at this point. Furthermore, because they do not put up any resistance, they frequently get dissatisfied, puzzled, or simply mute. In his warning, Seneca pointed out that anger is frequently maintained by continuing to engage with it. If you continue to engage in an argument that is motivated by emotion for a longer period of time, it will gain more control over you. Distancing oneself from the situation, whether mentally or verbally, is one of the quickest methods to regain clarity within oneself. To put it another way, this response accomplishes just that. The emotional loop is broken before it may cause any harm that could be detrimental. The fact that this remark conveys a sense of self-respect is still another significant part of my response. People who are often arguing over everything tend to give off the impression of being reactive and emotionally dependent on being validated. However, a person who is able to withdraw in a calm manner gives the impression of being grounded and self-assured. It sends a message that your time, attention, and energy are resources that you value, and that you are not willing to squander them on interactions that are not useful. People's interactions with you will shift over time as a result of your use of this reaction. They come to the realization that emotional pressure, repetition, or provocation will not be able to lure you into an eternal dispute. Furthermore, once this comprehension is achieved, a great number of confrontations that are not essential are never ever brought about in the first place. Number 6. That sounds more like projection. This response becomes incredibly powerful when someone accuses you of behaviors they secretly display themselves. Psychology teaches that projection happens when people place their own insecurities, flaws, or fears onto others. Someone dishonest constantly accuses others of lying. Someone insecure aggressively criticizes others. Someone manipulative claims everyone else is manipulative. When you calmly say, "That sounds more like projection," you shift the psychological mirror back toward them. Marcus Aurelius advised himself to observe human behavior carefully and remember that harmful actions often come from inner confusion and insecurity. Stoicism encourages awareness rather than impulsive emotional reactions. This response works best when delivered calmly because the goal is not cruelty, the goal is awareness. Aggressive delivery weakens the impact, but calm delivery strengthens it dramatically. Many people become silent because deep down they recognize the truth in what you are saying. Emotionally intelligent individuals understand that criticism often reveals more about the speaker than the target. The fact that this answer doesn't openly criticize the individual, but nevertheless compels them to examine themselves, makes it even more potent. You are drawing attention to the potential that their remarks are influenced by their psychological condition, rather than intensifying the disagreement. Just that alteration has the power to drastically alter the conversation's tone. All of a sudden, the emphasis shifts from defending yourself to determining whether their charge truly reveals more about them than about you. According to Epictetus, most individuals are troubled by how they perceive reality rather than by reality itself. Similarly, charges are frequently more about perception influenced by emotion than they are about the reality. When someone projects their fears onto other people, they are displaying their internal conflict rather than describing reality. Without resorting to confrontation, this reaction reveals that trend. The other person experiences an uncomfortable moment of self-awareness as a result. Seldom is projection deliberate. Most of the time, people are unaware that they are doing it. Therefore, it breaks their emotional momentum when you gently point it out. They are compelled to stop and think about whether what you say is true. Since most emotional attacks are motivated by certainty, that delay frequently lessens their hostility. Seneca cautioned that unbridled emotions can skew judgment and lead individuals to hold irrational beliefs. An excellent illustration of this distortion is projection. A person starts to believe that other people have the same shortcomings that they are experiencing on the inside. You are not insulting them when you calmly identify this pattern. Rather, you are merely reflecting their actions in a more understandable manner. This reaction also eliminates emotional defensiveness from your side of the argument, which is another reason it works so well. By addressing the psychological pattern itself, you are avoiding point-by-point arguments. You become more detached from the accusation as a result, and emotional control is restored in that distance. Responses such as this alter how people interact with you over time. People who rely on emotional blame or projection start to hesitate because they understand that their strategies can be acknowledged rather than accepted, and many rash allegations completely lose their impact when that awareness grows. Number 7. I'm comfortable with who I am. Nothing silences judgment faster than self-acceptance. Many insults lose their power the moment the target refuses to feel ashamed. People often criticize others hoping to trigger insecurity or emotional weakness. But when you calmly respond with, I'm comfortable with who I am, you remove the emotional weapon from their hands entirely. This response communicates deep confidence, not arrogance. There is something extremely unsettling about a person who fully accepts themselves, because such individuals become very difficult to manipulate. Seneca believed that people suffer deeply because they depend too heavily on public approval. Stoicism teaches that true peace begins when your self-worth no longer depends on the crowd. Throughout life, people will try to define your value through their opinions, criticism, and judgments. But emotionally strong people understand that self-worth cannot depend on external validation. The moment you stop needing approval from everyone around you, many people lose the ability to control you emotionally. That is true freedom. The fact that this reaction does away with the emotional target that the majority of insults are based on provides it with an even greater degree of effectiveness. A lot of individuals are unaware of the fact that criticism is only effective when it is directed toward insecurity. When someone perceives that you are uncertain, they exert more effort. They become more aggressive if they detect an emotional reaction. However, when you say in a calm manner, I am comfortable with who I am, you entirely seal that opportunity. Because you are not exhibiting any behavior that is characterized by resistance, fear, or the desire for affirmation, there is nothing left for them to grasp onto. When confronted with criticism, Marcus Aurelius frequently reflected on the significance of maintaining one's inner stability. It was important for him to remind himself that the acceptance of others is unstable and ever-changing. Suddenly, they are praising you, and then another moment later they are criticizing you. In the event that your tranquility is contingent upon their acceptance, then your tranquility will never be stable. The same Stoic stability may be seen in this response. Additionally, it conveys the message that your identity is not being negotiated in real time based on the judgment of another individual. The other person is also subject to a subtle psychological impact as a result of it. When someone anticipates feeling insecure but instead encounters calm acceptance, it causes them to have their expectations disrupted. Many people who are critical or judgmental rely on subtle domination to get what they want. They anticipate that their own words will elicit a response of reluctance, explanation, or emotional defense. However, when none of these occurs, their influence becomes less significant. In many instances, it even prompts individuals to reevaluate their own approach for the simple reason that their typical tactic is no longer producing the desired results. According to Epictetus, the first step toward achieving freedom is to avoid tying your sense of self-worth to factors that are beyond your control. Opinions expressed by other individuals are immediately included in that category. While you are unable to influence what other people think, you do have complete power over whether or not those thoughts define you. Having that basis is essential to having emotional independence, and this response articulates it in a way that is both straightforward and effective. The fact that this statement does not take a defensive stance is another key factor. There is no argument, justification, or rebuttal in this. It merely expresses a truth that is anchored in reality regarding your interior state. This lack of defensiveness frequently causes discomfort for individuals who anticipated being emotionally vulnerable but did not receive it. You are demonstrating that your sense of self is already stable, which is a much better alternative to feeding conflict. By behaving in this manner on a consistent basis, a strong psychological border can be established over time. People are starting to understand that their opinions do not have the ability to destabilize you. In addition, once this awareness is made known, the effectiveness of many attempts to cause insecurity naturally diminishes. Number 8. You seem upset. This response can instantly expose emotional imbalance in another person. When someone becomes aggressive, insulting, or emotionally unstable, calmly observing their emotional state shifts the dynamic immediately. Instead of defending yourself emotionally, you quietly draw attention to their behavior. This often catches people off guard because they expected emotional resistance, not calm observation. The power of this response comes from emotional contrast. If the other person is angry while you remain calm, everyone notices the difference automatically. Calmness naturally appears stronger than emotional chaos. Marcus Aurelius wrote that the best revenge is refusing to become like the person who wronged you. Stoicism teaches that emotional discipline is a form of superiority because it keeps your mind clear while others lose control of themselves. However, tone matters greatly here. This response should never sound sarcastic or mocking because the power comes from composure, not humiliation. Emotionally intelligent individuals understand that controlling themselves is often enough to expose those who cannot control themselves. This answer is even more potent since it quietly draws attention to their emotional condition rather than your defense. The aggressive individual in most hot arguments expects you to defend yourself, retaliate, or become just as upset. However, you entirely break that pattern when you calmly say, "You seem upset." You are studying their actions rather than responding to their words, and that change alone has the power to drastically alter the tone of the exchange. True strength, according to Epictetus, is the ability to watch events without letting them influence your emotions. In this instance, you are just identifying their fury rather than taking it in or mirroring it. You are taken off the emotional battlefield and put in a position of clarity by that realization. Furthermore, clarity is significantly more potent than emotional response during times of conflict. A psychological mirror effect is also produced by this reaction. Being gently pointed out when someone is exhibiting emotionally unstable behavior can compel a moment of self-awareness. In heated situations, many people are unaware of how they are coming across. Therefore, you can stop their escalation when you gently draw attention to it, even indirectly. They abruptly realize that their emotional condition is apparent rather than concealed, which frequently lessens the intensity of their actions. Seneca cautioned that anger is frequently most harmful when it persuades individuals that their emotional response is entirely warranted. However, anger loses some of its instinctive control once it is acknowledged and mirrored. Because it reveals the emotion rather than suppressing it, calm observation may be more successful than direct confrontation. The contrast this response produces is another significant feature. Anyone watching the situation can see the disparity when one person maintains composure, while the other reacts emotionally. Naturally, calmness seems more secure, grounded, and in control. Without a single insult being delivered, this disparity frequently modifies the perceived power dynamic. However, tone and intent play a major role in how effective this response is. When used mockingly or sarcastically, it might intensify conflict rather than diffuse it. This line's power stems from neutrality rather than superiority. It should sound more like an observation than a condemnation. People's interactions with you change over time when you engage in this kind of peaceful introspection. People who have a tendency to become emotionally reactive start to realize that their actions are obvious and acknowledged, which frequently deters them from getting worse. Furthermore, calm intellect naturally regains control of the debate when emotional escalation becomes ineffective. Number 9. We clearly think differently. This response ends pointless conflict while maintaining dignity and emotional control. Not every disagreement requires resolution because some people simply see life differently. Trying to force agreement often creates unnecessary tension and emotional exhaustion. When you calmly say, "We clearly think differently," you acknowledge reality without hostility. You recognize the difference without attacking the person personally. Epictetus reminded his students that every person experiences the world through their own perceptions and experiences. Stoicism teaches acceptance of human differences rather than emotional warfare over every disagreement. This response is especially powerful in emotionally charged situations because it prevents escalation while preserving self-respect. Strong communicators understand that peace sometimes requires accepting that not everyone will understand you. Wisdom is knowing the difference between meaningful discussion and useless conflict. People who constantly argue are often seeking dominance rather than understanding. Calm acceptance removes their battlefield completely. The fact that this reaction immediately eliminates the requirement to win the argument is one of the reasons why it is of even greater effectiveness. This is the reason that the majority of disagreements continue. Both parties are attempting to demonstrate their superiority, convince the other side, or defend their ego. On the other hand, when you say in a composed manner, "We clearly think differently," you completely remove yourself from the competition. At this point, you are no longer taking part in the competition for domination. Instead, you are recognizing a straightforward reality. It is possible for two points of view to coexist without one of them destroying the other. On numerous occasions, Marcus Aurelius reminded himself that not every argument warranted engagement, particularly when it resulted in aggravation rather than understanding. His musings highlight the fact that achieving mental tranquility is more valuable than prevailing in intellectual conflicts that are devoid of resolution. The aforementioned remark is an excellent example of the Stoic concept. Inner peace is given precedence over validation from the outside world. The other individual is also subject to a significant psychological impact as a result of this comment. The reason that many people continue to argue is because they anticipate opposition. They anticipate opposition, emotional tension, or a desire to correct them that they will receive. However, when you embrace the difference in a calm and collected manner, you completely eliminate that reluctance. When there is no resistance, the emotional energy that was present in the dispute starts to diminish. There are various instances in which the other party loses interest in the conflict because there is no longer anything for the conflict to feed on. Seneca cautioned on the fact that disputes that are not required frequently consume more energy than they are worth. He held the belief that wisdom entails the ability to recognize when it is appropriate to depart from a conflict that serves no purpose. This reaction exemplifies that concept by conveying the message that you do not have an emotional investment in bringing about change in someone who is not willing to comprehend others. The fact that this term does not compromise your dignity is still another significant factor. You keep your composure and respect for yourself rather than getting defensive, argumentative, or emotionally reactive because of the situation. Not only are you not disregarding the other person, but you are also not allowing yourself to be drawn into a never-ending cycle of dispute. The strength of this approach lies in the fact that it strikes a balance. Maintaining this frame of mind will, over time, completely transform the way you approach discussions. You start to become aware of the differences between a conversation that is useful and one that is only emotional noise. In addition, once this distinction is made plain, many disagreements spontaneously disappear before they even begin. This is due to the fact that not every disagreement needs to be a conflict. Number 10. I have nothing to prove. This may be the most powerful response of all because it reflects complete inner security. Many people spend their entire lives desperately trying to prove their intelligence, strength, success, or worth to others. But the strongest individuals eventually realize something important. True confidence never begs for recognition. When someone underestimates you, questions your value, or tries to provoke insecurity, saying "I have nothing to prove" demonstrates extraordinary emotional strength. This response communicates that your self-worth is internally grounded rather than externally controlled. Seneca warned that people who constantly chase validation become prisoners of public opinion. Stoicism teaches that freedom begins when your peace no longer depends on applause. People who seek attention through criticism often become silent when they realize they cannot pull you into emotional competition or insecurity. Quiet confidence is one of the rarest forms of power in the modern world, and nothing unsettles insecure individuals more than someone who remains calm, secure, and completely unshaken. The fact that this response instantly eliminates the basis of the other person's attempt to provoke you makes it even more potent. The majority of insults, challenges, and critiques are intended to elicit a response that demonstrates something. Defensiveness to demonstrate your impact, rage to demonstrate your concern, or over-explanation to demonstrate your value. However, you entirely break out of that system when you simply state, "I have nothing to prove." You are not taking part in their emotional test anymore. Marcus Aurelius frequently considered the notion that inner discipline and self-governance, rather than outward affirmation, are the sources of true authority. Even though he was in charge of the most powerful empire in history, he constantly reminded himself that other people's admiration, criticism, and acceptance ultimately had no bearing on who he really was. That same Stoic independence is evident in this response. It conveys the message that regardless of who doubts it, your identity is not negotiable. In many hostile settings, this remark also induces a psychological shutdown. Individuals who attempt to control talks or incite uneasiness frequently do it with the hope that you will become emotionally invested. However, their method becomes ineffective if you don't defend, compete, or escalate. There is no longer any argument to win, no response to elicit, and no emotional leverage to employ. Because it upsets the dynamic they were attempting to control, that lack of response frequently makes them uneasy. According to Epictetus, achieving freedom entails controlling what is under your power and letting go of what is not. You have no influence over the thoughts, views, and provocations of other people. Your reaction is still under your control, and one of the most obvious manifestations of that independence is the decision to refrain from emotional rivalry. The silence that follows is another significant aspect of this reaction. The conversation frequently stalls when someone understands they can't push reason or incite insecurity. There is nowhere to release the emotional tension. Because the psychological game has been finished, the interaction frequently simply ceases or becomes neutral. People's interactions with you change over time when you continuously adopt this approach. People who depend on emotional pressure start to realize that it is no longer effective. And once you realize that your self-worth cannot be undermined by words or opinions, fewer people try to undermine your confidence in the first place. Words have the ability to generate power as well as conflict. The loudest, cruelest, or most confrontational reactions aren't usually the best ones. In actuality, emotional mastery is nearly always the source of great verbal power. Centuries ago, the Stoics recognized this. Marcus Aurelius maintained composure under extreme strain while leading an empire. Epictetus preached that inner tranquility is more important than approbation from others. Seneca cautioned that unbridled emotions obliterate discernment and wisdom. Because they are adept at timing, psychology, and emotional control, people who are skilled at calm communication frequently control discussions without raising their voices. Remember this the next time someone tries to offend, irritate, control, or scare you. Your strongest suit is not an emotional response. Your ability to respond with control is your strongest suit. Because you automatically shift the balance of power when you maintain your composure while others lose it. The loudest individuals in the room gradually become the quietest.